The email landed in my inbox at 3:17 a.m., a single sterile line of text that felt like a punch to the gut. Following a review of the catastrophic failure in the Lakeside Pavilion submission, your access to all Ethelred and Vance servers and properties has been temporarily suspended. I stared at the words on my phone screen, the cold blue light illuminating the tear that slid, hot and silent, down my cheek. Suspended. It was a word for misbehaving children, for rogue cops, for people who had done something wrong. And I had done something so terribly, terribly wrong. The worst part was, I had no idea what it was. Just 12 hours earlier, I was on top of the world, standing before the Chicago Civic Design Committee, my voice ringing with a confidence I'd spent a decade earning. And then, in a single horrifying moment, it all came crashing down around me, brought down by a single red line on a blueprint that should never have been there. My name is Maya Lindstoddard. I'm an architect. Or at least, I was. And this is the story of how the man I trusted most, my partner and my friend, tried to burn my career to the ground, and how I had to walk through the fire to build it back, stronger than before. My love affair with buildings started long before I knew what a blueprint was. It began in the dusty, sun-drenched framework of half-finished houses my father built. He was a contractor, a man who spoke the language of wood and steel, who could look at a pile of lumber and see a home. I'd follow him around job sites in suburban Illinois, my small hand in his calloused one, breathing in the scent of sawdust and fresh paint. He never just built houses. He built the spaces where lives would unfold. "See this, Maybug?" he'd say, pointing to a wide-open space that would become a kitchen. "This isn't just where they'll cook. This is where they'll have arguments and makeup, where kids will do their homework, where they'll stand on Christmas morning, smelling the turkey. You're not just building walls, you're building memories." That idea lodged itself deep in my soul. I didn't just want to build things, I wanted to create spaces that mattered, that moved people, that felt like they had always been meant to be there. I drew constantly, filling sketchbooks with fantastical buildings and redesigns of my own bedroom. My dad, instead of telling me to be more practical, framed my best drawings and hung them in his small office. He was the one who bought me my first drafting table, who drove me to a lecture by a visiting architect at the University of Illinois, and who hugged me so tight I could barely breathe when I got my acceptance letter to Cornell's architecture program. College was a crucible. It was sleepless nights fueled by coffee and desperation, models built with trembling, glue-covered fingers, and critiques that could peel your skin off layer by layer. But I thrived on it. I loved the challenge, the precision, the blend of art and engineering. It was there that I honed my philosophy, that a building should be honest. The materials should be true to themselves, the structure should be visible, and its purpose should be clear. I wasn't interested in frivolous ornamentation or trendy facades that would look dated in 5 years. I wanted to build things that would last, things with integrity. After graduation, I landed a coveted junior architect position at a big corporate firm in New York. It was a good job, a prestigious name on my resume, but my soul shriveled a little each day. I was designing curtain walls for soulless glass office towers and calculating HVAC loads for parking garages. The work was anonymous, a cog in a massive machine. The memories being built in those spaces were of fluorescent lights and quarterly reports. I yearned for Chicago, the city of broad shoulders and architectural giants, the city where my dad had first shown me the magic of a steel skeleton reaching for the sky. That's when I found Ethelred and Vance. They weren't one of the behemoth firms, but they were a legend in Chicago. Marcus Ethelred and Robert Vance had started the firm in the 80s, building a reputation for thoughtful, elegant, and uniquely client-focused designs. They did libraries, small museums, university buildings, and high-end residential projects that were more art than architecture. They were the kind of firm I had dreamed of working for. Getting a job there was like winning the lottery. I poured my entire being into my portfolio and my application, And after 3 grueling interviews, I got the call. I packed my 2 suitcases, broke my lease in Brooklyn, and moved back to the Midwest without a second thought. The offices of Ethelred and Vance were exactly what you'd expect. A renovated loft in the West Loop with exposed brick walls, soaring timber ceilings, and massive windows that flooded the space with light. The air hummed with a quiet, intense energy. And it was there on my very first day that I met Julian Croft. He was the firm's golden boy. Tall, effortlessly charming, with a smile that could disarm a firing squad and a wardrobe that looked like it was lifted from a men's fashion magazine. While I was quiet, intense, and more comfortable with a T-square than with small talk, Julian was the opposite. He was the rainmaker, the guy who could walk into a room of skeptical donors and walk out with a commission. He had a preternatural ability to understand what a client wanted, even before they did, and to make them feel like they were the most important person in the world. We were assigned to work together on a small gallery renovation. I was the design lead. He was the project manager, handling the client and the budget. At first, it felt like a perfect partnership. I would lose myself for hours in the design, sketching, modeling, finding the perfect way to route light through the space. Julian would take my sometimes incoherent creative ramblings and translate them into a compelling narrative for the client. He'd look at my sketches and say, "I see it. You're not just creating a gallery, you're creating a journey for the eye. That's how we'll sell it." And he would. We were a formidable team. Our gallery project won a local design award. We followed it up with a complex historical home restoration in Lincoln Park, and then a stunning, minimalist library for a private school on the North Shore. We became the firm's go-to duo. Ethelred and Vance, our senior partners, loved us. They saw us as the future of the firm. Maya has the vision and Julian has the voice, Mr. Ethelred, a stern but fair man with a shock of white hair, once told me, "Together, you're unstoppable." For a few years, I believed him. We were more than colleagues. We were friends. We'd grab drinks after a tough week, complain about impossible clients, and celebrate our wins. He was the one I called when my dad had a health scare, and I was the one who helped him move into his ridiculously slick condo overlooking the river. I trusted him, implicitly. Looking back, of course, the warning signs were there. They were like hairline cracks in a foundation, easy to ignore until the whole structure starts to shift. There was the time he presented my initial concept sketches for the library project as a collaborative brainstorming session, subtly positioning himself as a co-creator of the core idea. I let it go. We were a team, after all. Then there was the issue with the materials for the Lincoln Park restoration. I had specified reclaimed heart pine from a specific supplier in Wisconsin, known for its quality and historical accuracy. Julian, trying to bring the project in under budget to impress the client, switched it for a cheaper, newer wood without telling me. It looked fine, but it wasn't right. It was a small lie, a compromise of the building's integrity. When I confronted him, he was so smooth, so reasonable. "Maya, come on. The client is thrilled with the cost savings, and 99% of people will never know the difference. Sometimes you have to be pragmatic. It's about the big picture." "The big picture is made of small details, Julian," I argued. "Honesty in materials is part of the design." He just smiled that easy smile of his. "And a happy client who gives us another project is part of our survival. Don't be so rigid. Architecture is a business, not a religion." I let it go. Again. I told myself he was right, that I was being too idealistic, too precious. I was the artist. He was the businessman. We needed each other. But a small seed of unease was planted. I noticed how he managed his relationships in the office. He was a master of collecting chits, of doing small favors and making people feel indebted to him. He cultivated a network of allies, from the junior assistants to the senior partners, while I just focused on the work. I thought the work would speak for itself. That was my mistake. I thought we were on the same team, climbing the same ladder. I didn't realize he was willing to kick me off to get to the top first. The moment that changed everything came in the form of an email from the city. Chicago was announcing a competition to design the new Lakeside Arts Pavilion, a multi-use performance and exhibition space to be built on a prime piece of lakefront property near the museum campus. This wasn't just a big project, it was a legacy project. It was the kind of building that defines a career, that gets your name in the history books. For a Chicago architect, it was the holy grail. The entire office buzzed with excitement, but for me, it was something more. It was a calling. I had walked that stretch of lakefront 100 times, imagining what could be there. I could see it, feel it in my bones, a building that wasn't just on the lake, but of the lake. Something that echoed the waves, that played with the light, that felt both monumental and intimately connected to the landscape. Mr. Ethelred called Julian and me into his office. The dark wood and leather smelled of history and power. "This is the one," he said, his eyes gleaming. "This project will put Ethelred and Vance on the international map. I want you two to lead the pitch, pour everything you have into it. Winning this would mean a named partnership for both of you." A named partnership, Ethelred, Vance, Croft, and Stoddard. It was the dream. And for the next 6 months, the Lakeside Pavilion became my entire world. I lived, ate, and breathed that project. I filled a dozen sketchbooks. I spent weeks researching wave dynamics and the way light refracts off the water at different times of day. My design took shape, a series of nested, curving shells, made of white concrete and shimmering, iridescent glass that seemed to rise out of the earth like a piece of the landscape itself. It was ambitious, complex, and the most beautiful thing I had ever conceived. Julian, as always, was the front man. He schmoozed the committee members, put together slick marketing materials, and built the narrative. But the partnership felt different this time. The easy collaboration was gone, replaced by a subtle, gnawing tension. He was constantly pushing for changes I felt compromised the design's core identity. "These curves are an engineering nightmare, Maya," he'd say, pointing at my model. "It's going to be astronomically expensive. Can't we simplify it? Make it more angular? It would be more assertive, more Chicago." "It's not supposed to be assertive," I'd argue, my frustration mounting. "It's supposed to be harmonious. The whole point is the organic form. It's a response to the lake, not a challenge to it." He'd sigh, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You're getting too emotionally attached. Think about what the committee wants to see. They want a landmark, an icon, something that will look great on a postcard." We clashed over everything, from the structural system to the interior finishes. He started having meetings about the project that I wasn't invited to. Closed-door sessions with the engineers, or quick chats with Mr. Vance. When I'd ask him about them, he'd be evasive. "Just handling the boring stuff, Maya. Budgets, logistics. You just focus on making it beautiful." A young intern named Ben, a bright, eager kid who I'd taken under my wing, came to me one evening looking worried. "Maya, this is probably nothing, but I saw Julian logged into your master file for the Pavilion project last night. It was like 10 o'clock. I just thought it was weird because you were already gone." A chill went down my spine, but I pushed it away. "He was probably just checking something for the presentation, Ben. He's as dedicated to this as I am." "Yeah, maybe," Ben said, not looking convinced. "It's just, he wasn't using the regular viewer. He had some kind of file editor open. I don't know. Forget I said anything." But I couldn't forget. The unease grew from a seed into a thorny vine, wrapping around my heart. I started saving backup copies of my work on a personal hard drive, a little act of paranoia that I felt vaguely ashamed of. The final weeks before the presentation were a blur of 18-hour days. The design was finalized, the engineering was sound, and our digital models were breathtaking. I had poured every ounce of my talent and my soul onto those digital pages. It was, I knew without a shred of doubt, the best work of my life. The night before the final presentation to the committee, the office was quiet except for the hum of our computers. I was doing my final meticulous review of every single drawing, every calculation in the 100-page blueprint file. Everything was perfect: the structural loads, the material specifications, the clearance tolerances. Perfect. Julian came by my desk around 11 p.m., holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're a machine," he said, placing one beside me. "It looks incredible. You've outdone yourself." "We've outdone ourselves," I corrected, managing a tired smile. "Yeah, well, mostly you on this one," he said with a magnanimous wave of his hand. "Listen, you look exhausted. Go home. Get some sleep. I'll do one last proofread of the PowerPoint, make sure the animations are smooth, and lock up." I hesitated for a second. That little voice of unease whispered to me, but I was bone-tired, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. "Are you sure?" "Positive," he said, his smile reassuring. "Go. You need to be sharp tomorrow. It's the biggest day of our careers." He was right. I trusted him. I packed my bag, took one last look at the pristine design on my monitor, and went home. It was the single greatest mistake of my life. The next morning, I walked into the presentation room at City Hall feeling a nervous, electric thrill. The room was intimidating, a cavern of dark wood and high ceilings, with the 11 members of the Civic Design Committee seated at a long, curved dais like a panel of judges. Mr. Ethelred and Mr. Vance sat in the front row, their faces tense with anticipation. Julian was beside me, looking immaculate in a tailored charcoal suit, giving me a confident wink. "Ready to knock 'em dead?" he whispered. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. The presentation began. Julian opened with his usual charm, painting a grand vision of the pavilion's impact on the city. Then it was my turn. I walked them through the concept, the philosophy behind the design, my voice growing stronger and more passionate as I spoke about the interplay of light and water, structure, and landscape. I could see them leaning in, their skeptical expressions softening into genuine interest. We were winning them over. "And now," I said, my voice full of pride, "I'd like to walk you through the structural design, which uses an innovative concrete rib system to achieve these organic forms." I clicked to the next slide, bringing up the master blueprint of the main shell structure on the huge screen behind me. And that's when the world stopped. Eleanor Vance, no relation to our Mr. Vance, but the universally respected, notoriously tough chairwoman of the committee, leaned forward, peering at the screen over her glasses. "Ms. Stoddard," she said, her voice cutting through the air like glass, "could you please zoom in on section C4, the primary load-bearing support?" My blood ran cold. I knew section C4 by heart. It was the linchpin of the entire structure. I navigated to the section, and the image filled the screen. And there it was. A single glaring, impossible red line. It was a notation from our structural analysis software, an override flag indicating a critical failure. The calculation for the tensile strength of the main support beam was wrong, not just slightly off, but catastrophically, amateurishly wrong. According to the plan on the screen, the entire roof would collapse under its own weight. A collective gasp went through the room. My mind reeled. It was impossible. I had checked it. I had checked it 100 times. I had checked it last night. That red line was not there. It was a ghost, a phantom, a nightmare made real. "Ms. Stoddard?" Eleanor Vance's voice was now laced with ice. "Are you presenting this committee with a design that is fundamentally unsound? This is not just an error. This is gross negligence." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat was a desert. My carefully constructed presentation, my career, my dream, all of it was incinerating before my eyes. I looked desperately at Julian, hoping for support, for an explanation. He had a look of perfectly crafted horror on his face. He shook his head slowly, a mask of deep disappointment. Eleanor, I am as shocked as you are, he said, his voice filled with grave concern. He stood up, subtly putting a foot of distance between us. I'm not a structural engineer. I trusted my partner to handle the technical specifications. Clearly, there has been a terrible oversight. He threw me under the bus. So cleanly, so completely. In that one moment, I wasn't his partner. I was a liability he was cutting loose. The committee members were staring at me, their faces a mixture of pity and disgust. Mr. Ethelred and Mr. Vance looked like they had been physically struck. I felt a wave of nausea so powerful I had to grip the lectern to keep from falling. I stood there, mute and shaking, under the damning glare of that single, impossible red line. My dream had become a public execution, and the man I trusted had just handed the executioner the axe. The walk out of City Hall was a blur of shame. The air, which had felt so full of promise an hour before, now seemed thick and suffocating. Mr. Ethelred and Mr. Vance walked ahead of us, their backs rigid with fury, not speaking a word. Julian walked beside me, the picture of sympathetic concern. Maya, I'm so sorry, he murmured, his voice low. I can't believe that happened. Are you okay? I stopped on the granite steps, the chilly Chicago wind whipping my hair across my face. I looked at him, really looked at him. The concerned brow, the sad eyes, the downturned mouth. It was a performance, and a masterful one at that. And in that moment, the shock and confusion began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp certainty that felt like a shard of ice in my gut. How did you do it, Julian? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He feigned confusion. Do what? Maya, you're not making sense. You must be in shock. It was a mistake, a terrible career-ending mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. We all make them. Not that one, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. I don't make that mistake. That plan was perfect last night. It was perfect when I left. He sighed, a long, sorrowful sound. Maybe you were just tired. We've all been working so hard. It's easy to miss something when you're exhausted. He put a hand on my arm, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like a brand. We'll figure this out. I'll talk to them. I'll try to smooth things over. I pulled my arm away. Don't touch me. The ride back to the office was silent. When we arrived, we were immediately summoned to Mr. Ethelred's office. It felt less like an office and more like a courtroom. Mr. Vance was pacing by the window overlooking the city, his hands clenched into fists. Mr. Ethelred sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his face a granite mask of disappointment. Explain, he said, his voice flat and dangerous. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to tell them something was wrong, that I'd been set up. But Julian spoke first. He was so quick, so decisive. Marcus, Robert, he began, his tone dripping with regret. I take full responsibility as the team lead. He started with a classic maneuver, accept vague responsibility to appear noble, then immediately pivot to the specific blame. I should have been more vigilant. I put too much pressure on Maya. She's a brilliant designer, the most brilliant I've ever worked with. But the scale of this project, I think she got overwhelmed. I saw the signs of burnout, but I pushed her. We all did. This failure is on me for not protecting my partner from her own exhaustion. It was brilliant, diabolical, but brilliant. He wasn't just blaming me, he was framing himself as the compassionate, loyal partner who was heartbroken by my failure. He was turning my hard work and dedication into a narrative of fragility and incompetence. I stared at him, dumbfounded. That's not what happened, I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. The plans were correct. I checked them myself right before I left. Someone must have changed them. Mr. Vance turned from the window. Changed them? Who would change them, Maya? And why? To what end? To deliberately sabotage the most important project this firm has ever competed for? The idea is preposterous. I don't know, I said, my eyes pleading with them, but I know what I saw. I know my own work. Julian shook his head sadly. Maya, we all want to believe that. But the evidence was on the screen for the entire committee to see. We can't deny what's right in front of us. He looked at our bosses. I think Maya needs some time to rest, to step away. The pressure has clearly taken its toll. Mr. Ethelred steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on me. It was the look of a man who had invested his trust and been spectacularly let down. Julian is right. We need to conduct a full internal review of the project files and server logs. In the meantime, Maya, I think it's best if you take a leave of absence, effective immediately. A leave of absence. It was a firing wrapped in a thin veil of corporate politeness. I was being cast out. You're just going to take his word for it? I asked, a desperate anger rising in my chest. After all the work I've done for this firm, all the successful projects? Your past successes don't excuse a failure of this magnitude, Mr. Ethelred said, his voice final. We've been humiliated. Our reputation is in jeopardy. I need you to go home, Maya. Someone from IT will be in touch about your equipment. I walked out of his office in a daze. My colleagues averted their eyes as I passed their desks. I could feel their whispers like insects crawling on my skin. I went to my own desk to grab my purse and my coat. My computer screen was already locked. A small gray box had appeared in the corner. Access denied. I made it to the elevator, down to the lobby, and out onto the cold Chicago street before the first sob escaped. I leaned against the rough brick of the building, a building I had helped design a small part of years ago, and let the despair wash over me. My career, the thing I had built my entire identity around, was gone, and the man I had called my friend had just handed me the shovel to bury it. That night, alone in my apartment, the email arrived. Temporarily suspended. It was official. I was an outcast. I curled up on my sofa, the city lights twinkling mockingly outside my window, and felt a hollowness so vast I thought it might swallow me whole. For a few hours, I let the self-doubt win. Had I made a mistake? Was Julian right? Was I so tired that I had hallucinated an entire night of work, that I had overlooked a flaw that a first-year student would have caught? The mind can play tricks on you when it's pushed to the limit. I replayed the last few weeks in my head, the arguments, the stress, the exhaustion. Maybe I had cracked. Then I thought of my dad. I thought of him on those dusty job sites, talking about honesty. A structure has to be honest, Maybug. If it's not, it'll fail. People are the same way. My dad didn't raise a woman who made that kind of mistake, and he certainly didn't raise a coward. The despair began to recede, replaced by a slow burning anger. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't been negligent. I had been sabotaged. And as I sat there in the dark, with the ruins of my professional life around me, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I didn't know how, but I was going to find the truth. I was going to get my life back. The foundation was cracked, but I was going to rebuild it, one piece of evidence at a time. The first few days of my suspension were a special kind of hell. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., my body still wired for the intense work schedule I'd kept for months, only to be met with a vast, empty expanse of time. My apartment, which had once been my sanctuary, now felt like a prison cell. Every corner held a reminder of my work, sketchbooks filled with designs, architectural models on my shelves, reference books stacked on the coffee table. It was all a monument to a life that had been stolen from me. I tried to be productive. I cleaned. I organized my closet. I went for long, aimless walks along the lakefront, torturing myself by passing the very spot where my beautiful phantom pavilion was supposed to stand. The silence was the worst part. The silence from the office was absolute. No calls, no emails, except for a sterile HR notification about the terms of my leave. My colleagues, people I'd shared lunches and late nights with, were silent. I couldn't blame them. In the cutthroat world of architecture, no one wants to be associated with a spectacular failure. I was radioactive. My dad called every day. "How are you holding up, Maybug?" he'd ask, his voice rough with concern. "I'm fine, Dad," I'd lie, trying to keep my voice steady. He'd always see right through it. "No, you're not. You've got that same tone you had in college when that professor gave you a B on the museum project, though I'm going to burn the world down tone." I let out a weak laugh. It's that obvious? To me, it is. So, what's the plan? You're not just going to sit there and take this, are you? "I don't have a plan, Dad. They've locked me out. It's my word against Julian's, and he's the golden boy. I'm the screw-up who cost the firm the biggest project in its history." "Bull," he said, the word a sharp crackle over the phone. "You know your work. I know your work. If you say those plans were right, they were right. So you find out who made them wrong. You treat it like a structural problem. You find the point of failure." His simple, unshakable faith in me was the first solid thing I'd had to stand on in days. He was right. I needed to stop mourning and start investigating. But where to begin? I had no access, no allies, and no proof. The first glimmer of hope came in the form of a text message a week after the disaster. It was from Ben, the young intern. "Hey, Maya, hope you're okay." Weird question, but do you know what ChronoSync is? My heart skipped a beat. "It's a file synchronization and backup software," I texted back. "Why?" "Julian had me install it on his workstation a couple weeks ago, said he wanted a personal off-server backup of his files. Just seemed odd since the firm has its own redundant backup system. Anyway, just thought you should know. Stay strong." It was a breadcrumb, but it was something. Why would Julian need a separate, private backup system? Unless he was planning on moving files he didn't want the firm's IT department to see. It was a thread. I just needed to pull it. The problem was, I couldn't get to the server logs or Julian's computer. I was persona non grata. I spent a whole day agonizing over it, running scenarios through my head. I could try to social engineer my way back in, call a friend in IT, but it was too risky. If I got caught trying to access the system, it would just confirm their narrative that I was unstable and untrustworthy. I realized I needed a professional. Someone from outside the company, someone with no biases, who could look at the digital evidence objectively. It was a long shot, and it would cost money I was no longer earning, but it was the only shot I had. I remembered a conversation from years ago. A security consultant who had given a lunch and learn at my old firm in New York about digital forensics. I dug through my old contacts and found her name, Anya Sharma. Her company, Digital Ghost, specialized in exactly this kind of thing: corporate espionage, data recovery, and tracking digital footprints. I called her. My hands were sweating as I explained the situation, feeling like a paranoid conspiracy theorist. I expected her to be dismissive, but she listened patiently. "So, to recap," she said when I finished, her voice calm and professional, "you believe your project partner altered a critical design file on the company server the night before a major presentation, causing you to lose the bid and get suspended. You have no direct proof, only a strong suspicion and an intern who saw him using third-party backup software." "That's about it," I said, feeling foolish. "It's more than you think," Anya replied, and I could have cried with relief. "People like your friend Julian, the charismatic ones, they always think they're smarter than the system. They get sloppy. The question is, can you get me access? Not to the live server, that would be illegal. But a system image? A clone of the server drive from that night? The firm's IT department would have made one for their own internal review. That was the hurdle. How could I get a copy of the server image? Ethelred and Vance wouldn't just hand it over to me. I needed a legal reason. I needed a lawyer. My next call was to my older sister, Chloe. She wasn't a lawyer, she was a PR executive. But in her line of work, she knew every good and every vicious lawyer in Chicago. "You need someone who isn't afraid to play hardball," Chloe said after I told her the whole sordid story. "You're not just trying to clear your name, you're fighting for your career. This isn't a polite disagreement, this is war." She gave me a name, David Chen. He was a specialist in employment law and intellectual property disputes. His reputation was that he was a bulldog. David Chen's office was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the old-world feel of Ethelred and Vance. He was a compact man with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making a note on a legal pad. "It's a classic corporate takedown," he said when I was done. "Happens every day. The problem, as you know, is proof. Right now, it's a he said, she said situation. And he has the advantage of incumbency and a narrative that makes you look incompetent." "So what do we do?" I asked, my hopes sinking. "We go on the offensive," David said, a predatory gleam in his eye. "We're not going to sue for wrongful termination, not yet. We're going to sue for intellectual property theft." I blinked. "What?" "The design for the pavilion. It was your creation, correct? Your intellectual property. You were the design lead. We are going to file a petition stating our belief that your intellectual property was tampered with, and to prove it, we need to subpoena the server backups from the night of the incident for analysis by a neutral, court-appointed third-party expert." "Anya Sharma," I breathed. "Exactly," David said. "It's a strategic move. It forces their hand. They can't reasonably refuse a discovery request in an IP case. It gets us the evidence we need without you having to break any laws. And more importantly, it changes the conversation. You're no longer the negligent employee. You're the artist fighting to protect her creation. It puts them on the defensive." It was brilliant and terrifying. This would mean formally taking on my old firm, the place I had revered. It was burning the last bridge, but my other choice was to fade away, to let Julian's lie become my reality. "Do it," I said. The next 2 weeks were agonizingly slow. David filed the petition. Ethelred and Vance's high-priced corporate lawyers responded with motions to dismiss, calling it a frivolous and retaliatory action by a disgruntled employee. But David was relentless. He argued, he filed counter-motions, and eventually the judge agreed. A&V was ordered to produce a forensic image of the server from the night in question. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. Anya got the data. She worked for 3 days straight, sending me only cryptic updates. Finding some interesting file fragments? There are anomalies in the log files. I was a nervous wreck, pacing my apartment, barely eating. My entire future was sitting on a hard drive in her lab. Then she called. "Get over to my office, Maya. You're going to want to see this." I practically ran the 10 blocks to her office in the loop. She had the evidence displayed across 3 large monitors. It was a timeline of the night of the sabotage. "Okay, look here," she said, pointing to the first screen. "This is your login, 8:07 p.m. You open the master blueprint file, CADLP Master Final. You work on it for almost 3 hours with multiple saves. The last save is at 10:52 p.m. You log out at 10:54 p.m. Everything is clean. Your version of the file, which I was able to reconstruct from the server's shadow copies, is perfect. No red lines, no structural flaws." Tears of vindication welled in my eyes. I knew it. "It gets better," she said, moving to the next screen. "Or worse, depending on your perspective." At 11:15 p.m., Julian logs in from his workstation. He doesn't open the master file on the server. Instead, he opens that third-party backup software, ChronoSync. She showed me the logs. Julian had initiated a sync. A file on his local machine named Pavilion Revised DWG was uploaded to his private cloud storage. Then he used a file renaming utility. He renamed the original correct master file on the server to cadlp master old. Then he downloaded his Pavilion revised.dwg file from his cloud storage onto the ANV server and renamed it to cadlp master final, perfectly replacing my file with his. The timestamp on the file creation was 11:28 p.m. It was the smoking gun. He had swapped my perfect file with his sabotaged version. He was clever, Anya said. By using the third-party software, he tried to hide the direct transfer. And by renaming the files, he made it look like a simple update, not a replacement. He was counting on the firm's internal review being superficial, just checking the final file and the logout times. But the file itself, I asked, can you prove he created the flawed version? Anya smiled. Oh yeah, this is the beautiful part. Every CAD file has metadata embedded in it, a digital fingerprint. It tracks the user, the workstation, the version of the software, and every single edit. The sabotaged file, it was created on his workstation 2 weeks earlier. He had been working on it, refining his little act of destruction for days. He introduced the flaw, a single changed variable in the load-bearing calculation, and saved it, waiting for his moment. It was all there, cold, hard digital proof. The premeditation, the execution, the cover-up. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of panic. It was a calculated assassination. But Anya wasn't done. While I was digging around in his backup files, I found something else he didn't mean for anyone to see. A folder labeled Prospects. She opened it. Inside were emails. Emails between Julian and a senior partner at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, one of the largest and most prestigious architectural firms in the world, and a direct competitor to ANV. The emails laid out his plan in black and white. He was negotiating a senior partnership position there. The Lakeside Pavilion win was meant to be his audition piece, his golden ticket. He was planning to win the project for Ethelred and Vance and then jump ship, taking the project and the glory with him. My sabotage served two purposes. If he'd succeeded in swapping the files without anyone noticing until later, he could have played the hero, catching my mistake at the last minute, saving the day and cementing his value. But his primary plan, the one he executed, was even more sinister. By making me the scapegoat for losing the project, he created a narrative he could use with his prospective new employers. Ethelred and Vance was a sinking ship, hampered by incompetent talent like me, and he was the smart rat trying to get out. He had even drafted a letter of resignation. I stared at the screen, a feeling of nausea mixed with icy rage. He wasn't just trying to get a promotion over me, he was trying to burn the whole firm down on his way out, with me as the kindling. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I have the proof. Now what do I do with it? Anya looked at me. You have enough here to destroy him, Maya. The question is, how do you want to do it? The drive back from Anya's office was a blur. I had the evidence in a password-protected file on a thumb drive that felt as heavy as a brick in my pocket. This little piece of plastic and metal held Julian's future, and mine. My first instinct was pure white-hot rage. I wanted to email the evidence to everyone, to the partners, to the entire staff, to the civic design committee, to the press. I wanted to watch his world burn, just like he had tried to burn mine. But then my dad's voice echoed in my head. You're not just building walls, you're building memories. And my own mantra, a building should be honest. How I handled this would define me just as much as the pavilion design had. I could be a wrecking ball, or I could be an architect. I could destroy, or I could build. I called David Chen and told him everything. He was ecstatic. This is it, Maya. This is the kill shot. We can ruin him. We can sue him into the ground for damages. We can go to the district attorney with the evidence of corporate espionage. No, I said, cutting him off. The idea of a long, ugly public legal battle made my stomach turn. That was Julian's world, a world of scorched earth tactics and collateral damage. I didn't want to win on his terms. I wanted to win on mine. I have another idea. I want to handle this in-house. David was silent for a moment. Maya, these people hung you out to dry. They didn't believe you. Why are you protecting them? I'm not protecting them, I said. I'm protecting the firm. It's bigger than the partners. It's the work. It's the reputation they built over 30 years. It's Ben's future and the futures of the other junior architects. Julian was trying to destroy the whole company. I'm not going to finish the job for him. I want to set a different kind of precedent. I laid out my plan for David. He was skeptical at first, arguing it was too risky, too generous. But as I explained my reasoning, he started to understand. It wasn't about mercy, it was about control. It was about reclaiming my narrative in the place where I had lost it. The next morning, I sent a single, carefully worded email to Marcus Ethelred and Robert Vance. Dear Marcus and Robert, I have completed my own review of the events surrounding the Lakeside Pavilion presentation. I have uncovered information that is of critical importance to the future of the firm. I request a meeting with you both to present my findings. For this discussion to be productive, it is essential that Julian Croft be present. Sincerely, Maya Lynn Stoddard. The response was almost immediate. Our boardroom, tomorrow, 10 a.m. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I didn't just assemble the digital evidence. I built a case, a presentation, just as I would for a client. I created a timeline, clear graphics, and a crisp, logical narrative. I was going to beat Julian at his own game, but with one crucial difference. My story would be the truth. I walked into the Ethelred and Vance offices the next morning, feeling a strange sense of calm. The receptionist looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't smile or offer any explanation. I just said, I'm here for a 10 a.m. meeting with Mr. Ethelred and Mr. Vance. I was shown to the main boardroom. The long, polished table reflected the gray morning light. Mr. Ethelred and Mr. Vance were already there, their faces grim and unreadable. A moment later, Julian walked in. He looked surprised to see me, but he recovered quickly, his face settling into a mask of pity. Maya, he said, his voice soft. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're feeling better. I just looked at him, my expression blank. Let's wait for everyone to be seated. We sat in silence, the three of them on one side of the table, me on the other. It felt like an interrogation. Mr. Ethelred broke the silence. Maya, we received your email. You said you had new information. Frankly, after the damage that's been done, I'm not sure what information could possibly change things, but we agreed to hear you out. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. I plugged my thumb drive into the boardroom's presentation system. As you know, I have always maintained that the Pavilion blueprints I finalized were structurally sound, and that the flawed version presented to the committee was not my work. I have spent the last 3 weeks proving it. I brought up the first slide. It was a side-by-side comparison of 2 blueprint sections, my original perfect version and the sabotaged version with the glaring red line. This is what I submitted, I said, pointing to the correct version, and this is what was presented. Julian sighed dramatically. Maya, we've been over this. It was a mistake, a tragic one. There's no point in denying it. I'm not denying anything, Julian, I said, turning to look directly at him. I'm explaining it. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through it all. I presented Anya's forensic report, showing the file swap in meticulous, time-stamped detail. I showed them the metadata proving the sabotaged file was created on Julian's workstation 2 weeks before the presentation. A dead silence fell over the room. Mr. Ethelred and Mr. Vance were staring at the screen, their faces pale. Julian's mask of calm was beginning to crack. A muscle was twitching in his jaw. This is absurd, he stammered. She's fabricated this. She's hired some hacker to create a false narrative to save her own skin. The forensic expert who prepared this report is a court-approved neutral party, retained as part of a legal discovery process, I said calmly, letting that sink in. Her findings are admissible in a court of law. But you're right, Julian. A digital trail can be confusing, so let's talk about something simpler. Let's talk about your future. I clicked to the next slide. It was a screenshot of his email exchange with the partner at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, the one where he discussed his exit strategy and referred to A&V as a firm with deep-seated personnel issues that he was eager to escape. Robert Vance, who had been silent until now, made a choking sound. "Julian, what the hell is this?" Julian's face went white. The charm, the confidence, it all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind a raw, cornered panic. That's taken out of context. I was just exploring options. Everyone does it. Does everyone also create a sabotaged version of their own firm's most important project? I asked, my voice cutting. Does everyone systematically undermine their partner, blame them for a failure they themselves engineered, and plan to use that failure as a stepping stone to a better job? Because that's the context, Julian. You weren't just trying to get a promotion. You were trying to commit career murder on your way out the door. I let the silence hang in the air. Mr. Ethelred was staring at Julian, his eyes blazing with a cold fury I had never seen before. He looked like a man who had discovered a viper in his own house. "Julian," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is any of this true?" Julian opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked from me to the partners, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. There was nothing left to say. The evidence was absolute. He deflated, slumping in his chair, the fight gone out of him. Mr. Ethelred stood up. "Get out," he said. Julian looked up, stunned. "What?" "Get your personal effects from your desk. Security will escort you from the building. You are fired, effective immediately. Our lawyers will be in touch regarding the financial and legal ramifications of your actions. Now get out of my sight." Julian stood up, his face a mess of disbelief and fury. He shot me a look of pure hatred. "You," he spat, "you'll regret this." "No, Julian," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I think you're the one who's going to have regrets." He turned and stormed out of the boardroom without another word. A heavy silence remained. I stood there, my heart pounding, not with triumph, but with a profound and weary sadness. Mr. Ethelred finally turned to me. His base face was etched with shame and regret. "Maya, there are no words to express how sorry I am. We failed you. I failed you. I listened to the easy story instead of listening to you. I broke my own rule. I trusted the salesman over the architect. We should have known," Mr. Vance added, his voice hoarse. "We saw the ambition in him, but we mistook it for drive. We never imagined it was cancerous." "I can't apologize enough," Mr. Ethelred said. "We would be honored if you would consider coming back, not just to your old position. The partnership we discussed, it's yours. Ethelred, Vance, and Stoddard, if you'll have us." I looked at these two men, my mentors, who had been so quick to cast me out. The anger I had felt was gone, replaced by something else, a clear-eyed understanding. They were human. They had made a mistake, but they were also willing to own it. "There are conditions," I said. They both nodded. "Anything. First, a public statement to the entire firm, clarifying what happened and formally clearing my name. Second, I want to lead a new internal review process for projects to ensure this kind of sabotage can never happen again. I want to build a culture of genuine collaboration, not just competition. And third," I took a deep breath, "I want the firm to formally withdraw our losing bid from the Lakeside Pavilion competition and resubmit my original untampered design to the Civic Design Committee, not to win, but to set the record straight, to show them what our firm is really capable of. Mr. Ethelred looked at Mr. Vance, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the first genuine smile I had seen in weeks. "Done," he said. "Done." Welcome back, partner. The aftermath was not a victory parade. It was more like a quiet, painstaking reconstruction. Mr. Ethelred was true to his word. He sent a firm-wide memo that laid out the facts of Julian's termination and my reinstatement in stark, unambiguous terms, offering a formal public apology for the firm's failure to support me. The whispers in the hallways stopped, replaced by looks of respect and from some sheepish apology. Ben, the intern, was promoted to a junior architect position on my new team. Julian Croft vanished from the Chicago architecture scene. The threat of legal action from A&V combined with the quiet but swift dissemination of the story through the city's professional grapevine made him unemployable. The last I heard, he had moved to Dubai, trying to start over in a place where his reputation hadn't followed him. I felt no joy in his downfall, only a sense of grim justice. He had built his career on a faulty foundation, and it had inevitably collapsed. Rebuilding the firm's culture was the harder work. I implemented a new system of checks and balances, a collaborative review process that championed transparency and shared ownership of projects. It was about creating a structure where a single person's ambition couldn't again threaten the integrity of the whole. It was slow going, but gradually, the atmosphere in the office began to change. The tense, competitive edge softened into something more open and supportive. As for the Lakeside Pavilion, we resubmitted my original design as planned. We didn't win the commission, the process was too far along to be reversed. But our gesture made a statement. Eleanor Vance, the committee chairwoman, called me personally. "Ms. Stoddard," she said, her voice surprisingly warm, "what your firm did took courage. And your original design, it was breathtaking. I want you to know that the committee sees that. We won't forget it." She was true to her word. 6 months later, when the city announced a new project, a performing arts center for the botanical gardens, Eleanor called our firm directly and invited us to submit a proposal. There would be no public competition. The commission was ours if we wanted it. It was a project born not from a battle, but from a gesture of integrity. A year after that horrible day in City Hall, I stood on the construction site of the new arts center. The steel skeleton was rising against the sky, a testament not to revenge, but to resilience. I had walked through the fire of betrayal and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. The scars were a reminder of the vulnerability of trust, but also of the strength it takes to rebuild it, both in others and in yourself. I had learned that true power isn't about charisma or manipulation. It's about the quiet, unshakable integrity of your work and your word. Julian had tried to tear me down by attacking my creation, but in the end, my creation was what saved me. It was honest, and the truth, like a well-built structure, will always stand. My dad came to visit the site one afternoon. He stood beside me, looking up at the curving beams of steel, a proud smile on his face. "It's beautiful, Maybug," he said. "It's honest." I smiled back, the Chicago wind on my face feeling less like a bitter chill and more like a promise. "Yeah, Dad," I said, looking at the future taking shape before me. "It is."